We're pumped to welcome in Dusty Dvoracek every single Tuesday and Wednesday here on the Ref. What's going on, Dusty? How are you, man?
Doing fantastic. Have you been to Oxford, Mississippi before?
Never been. First trip.
Okay. I haven't been either. It's one of the spots that I have not been. We'll see if I make it there before the year's over. But I know before the year, I would say of all the destinations the Sooners will be playing at, I feel like this was universally the top one. I've still got several friends and big-time Sooner fans that are headed to Oxford here in the next few days. And so I know that they're trying not to let what's currently going on drag them down because they want to go experience Oxford, the Grove, and a good time. But I'll be intrigued to see what the turnout from Sooner Nation is there on Saturday.
I went on with a show in, I guess you could say, Oxford, and they were talking about a guy that has Airbnbs. He goes, we made more money than we ever have. It's been one of the highest grossing opponents that we've ever had here at Oxford. Even now we're going back 10 years, but even surpassing what Texas did whenever they had a trip there 10 years ago. So I know it's frustrating right now with where Oklahoma is offensively, but Dusty, you're right, man. It's a great trip. And this is the same team that lost to Kentucky at home a couple of weeks ago. I know they're getting some offensive linemen back. And, again, you want to go experience. That's what joining this conference, a lot of it was about, was opportunities like this. So I hope you're right. I hope people don't just say, oh, we've lost 2 games, I'm out, I'm tapping out, I'm done. I hope that's not the case.
I hope not. We shall see. I believe it's at the Vaught. Is it Vaught Hemingway? I think is the name of the stadium there in Oxford. So I'll be intrigued to see. They're coming off a bye. Obviously, they're still trying to grasp onto playoff hope. With 2 losses in, they still got Georgia coming to Oxford here in the next couple of weeks. So I would be surprised if Oklahoma doesn't get the best from Ole Miss on Saturday.
Hey, Dusty, we got a really good text, and I know usually whenever it comes to the text messages on this program, we like to wait to the second segment. But it was such a good question, I wanted to pose it to you here. And it was South Texas Sooner, and he said, what do you think is most responsible for Oklahoma's struggles this year? He said, 1, we don't have the right personnel. 2, we don't have the right scheme. Or 3, we don't have the right leadership. And both Josh and I mentioned, and injuries play a major part of this, the personnel. What would be your pick on that threesome?
So personnel, coaching, or leadership? Is that the 3 prongs?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's personnel, and that's a combination of, players that you selected via the portal. It's injuries. It's, I think it's personnel. Now, who selects the personnel?
Right.
Coaching. Mm-hmm. Who develops the personnel? It's coaching. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can blame personnel, coaches, as far as receiver goes. That's not, the injuries in that regard. It's tough to put injury. You can't put injuries on a coach. That's not leadership. But I think aside from receiver, that's the thing. Like, where are the other injuries at? Mm-hmm. The offense, you got Trevor back now.
That's right.
You've got all your pieces. This isn't outside of receiver, which I'm not saying is an insignificant piece. But this team, this offense, I'm going to just use the words of the head coach, which I thought were strong yesterday. The abomination that is the offense. Wow. Man, it's been rough. That's a strong statement from Coach V, calling the offense that. It's clearly been really bad. But personnel is where I would point the finger to answer your question. How do you not blame? I'm not in the blame game, and whenever I talk about these coaches, I just knowingly these are friends of mine and people that I care about, but they're the ones putting together this personnel. So I think that it has to be a combination of both. I hate to cop out of the answer.
No.
But I think that, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I agree.
if anyone's answer is personnel, well, okay, how'd the personnel come in?
Right.
And again, this is me not defending anybody. If there's one person that had the least to do with the personnel on this team, it's the man that just got fired.
Right.
I mean, everybody else has been there. Everybody else has been there and really has had time put in for the personnel that you're seeing on display. You know, that's just unfortunately, that's the truth. That's the reality.
I agree. And it's tough because you're in a position to where you're not going to have a magic elixir. You know, you're not going to be able to sprinkle fairy dust and fix everything. You kind of are what you are now on offense. But what do you think we can see different, if anything, you think?
Boy, isn't that the $1 million question?
I
mean,
know,
look,
man.
I hope that they are able to, you know, run the football a little bit more effectively. But I mean, we've talked about the deficiencies in the offensive line. I think at times they've had some pretty decent run schemes. I don't think that they've got running backs that make people miss. You know, I actually caught some of what I was listening to some of Ted yesterday afternoon. And, you know, I thought he said some really good stuff. And he was talking about at running back for so long under Cale Gundy. I mean, think about the running backs that came through Oklahoma. And I sat there and I started thinking about, you know, big time. I mean, Quentin Griffin, Adrian Peterson, Samaje Perine, Joe Mixon. I mean, you just go down the list. I mean,
Right.
Just excellent running back after excellent running back after excellent running back. And, boy, it just seems like you're so removed from that. I mean, you could probably do that in a lot of positions, but running back in particular. I mean, to the point now where it's just like, can you make somebody miss? But what can I expect? I mean, you'd love to be able to see them be able to run the football a little bit and get Jackson Arnold into some kind of rhythm, and for Joe John Finley to have a good plan that gets the defense, you know, a step off. And, man, to be able to convert on third down, wouldn't that be something that would be just riveting to see a drive really get established and get going. So, I mean, I think the same thing that what are you hopeful for? You're hopeful for all those things. And that's what Joe John and this staff are charged with trying to do. But, I mean, I really think that getting the blocking to a place where they can have success doing anything, I think that's got to be top of mind, right? Like, because that's I would, if you can protect, if you can open up holes, if you can be successful, and that incorporates the tight end room, that incorporates your backs, that incorporates your receivers on the perimeter. When you're talking about the running game, that's how you're able to have success. And that's just one thing that's been a struggle throughout the course of this year. The inability to run the football, protect with any kind of regularity. It's been pretty jarring, and I got my fingers crossed that they're able to find a way to do that coming up this weekend.
Kevin Johns would fit under that umbrella that you were talking about earlier, Dusty, which is he didn't assemble this personnel for Oklahoma, and now he's in this potentially very challenging spot if and when he has a very, very serious role in the play calling department. Right now it sounds like just oversight of quarterbacks, but how challenging is this situation for Kevin Johns, and how much involvement do you think realistically he could have as this season unfolds the rest of the way?
Well, I think he's got to have – I mean, someone's got to be coaching the quarterbacks. I mean, you know, if your offensive coordinator is your quarterback's coach and he just got fired, I mean, you got to have somebody in that room that's coaching quarterbacks, and he has experience coordinating offenses, coaching quarterbacks. He is the most experienced person currently on that staff that I know of as it relates to helping develop quarterbacks. So I think he's got to have a role. I don't see how he doesn't. And correct me if I'm wrong, the analyst role has changed, correct?
That's right.
There's not the stipulations that there had been previously, thank goodness. And I don't know on the fly if they would have needed to, if they could change a title to help ensure and allow that to happen. So, I mean, I'm sure that's possible. JP Lossman is also on staff. JP has never been a position coach, but he's obviously a former first-round pick at quarterback. So he has experience playing the position. He's been on staff at Clemson, at OU, and a member of staffs that BV has been involved with for a while. I think just his experience, potentially that's something you tap into, but he's never coached that position, and I do think that there's a difference. So I think Kevin Johns, what is he tasked with, Josh? A lot. A lot. He's tasked with trying to get that room in a better spot to get more production out of Jackson Arnold to help help him in a lot of facets, and just with his overall timing and getting the ball out and seeing the field and running this offense efficiently and effectively. And that goes the exact same with the true freshman in Michael Hawkins. So he's tasked with a lot, and I think he has to play a significant role in, at the very minimum, the development of these young, inexperienced quarterbacks.
It's been tough, man. It's been a challenge, and we were talking about it yesterday. Dusty, it's nothing that you want to talk about, right? I can't even fathom that we're in this spot, and I look at that number, and I can't believe that Ole Miss is a 20-plus point favorite going into this weekend. But when you shift that focus to this weekend, boy, even though you look at the numbers and it's impressive for Ole Miss as far as yardage, when it comes to SEC play, their offense has struggled. And they're getting some linemen back, and he wants to be able to make a statement. And Lane Kiffin, wants to be able to kind of show his fans, hey, listen, we can move the football in a good defense. So you're going to be in a spot where there's not going to be any punches pulled this week, and Lane's going to be out for blood, especially after two very frustrating losses for Ole Miss.
No doubt. Their one good performance, I was there for South Carolina.
Looked great.
They did. Their offensive line, they've really struggled at times this year, especially in protection. They've not run the football nearly as effectively. I mean, and here's the other part too. You can go back and look at the success Oklahoma had defensively against Tennessee. It's not a carbon copy offense, but it's very similar. And so, we saw that Oklahoma defense really give Tennessee all kinds of issues, and I think they can give Ole Miss some issues also. It's that Baylor style offense. They want to operate as fast as you can, possibly go. Probably very similar to what we're going to see from Joe John Finley as well. But up front, they got a lot of good pieces outside. Trey Harris is a phenomenal wide receiver. Antoine Juice Wells, he has got speed. He can take the top off of defense. Jackson Dart's got good mobility. He can throw the deep ball. It can be a little erratic at times and got a little bit of a gunslinger mentality, but he's taking better care of the football. They've got some really good components, but up front, man, they have, when they've been challenged and they've been tested, Kentucky flat out got after them, gave them all kinds of issues. LSU did the exact same thing. I want to say LSU, I think they had like 6 sacks in that game, and they got all over that Ole Miss offensive line. It was interesting because in the game that I had with them, I thought that they actually did a relatively decent job against South Carolina's front. And we obviously, I don't have to tell Sooners fans after the 9-sack performance they had against Oklahoma what they're capable of. But that to me is where I think Oklahoma can win. And this defensive line and the front has continued to be good. Now, the one thing that they're gonna check your oil, and they're gonna make sure that you can defend, shots down the field. That is one thing that you're gonna get several instances of on Saturday. And Oklahoma's secondary, if they're peeking, if they're in the wrong spot, if there's any bust in coverage, they will take advantage of it down the field. But I really do think that as we've seen Ole Miss's offense sputter a little bit, I think that the biggest culprit's their offensive line, and I think Oklahoma could take advantage of that on Saturday.
Dusty, before we grab a break, what's your game this week? Where are you heading?
I am headed to the 305. I've got Miami and Florida State. We're ESPN primetime Saturday night, and probably not the sizzle that you would have thought maybe before the season, before the year. This might have been, a potential play-in ACC championship type of game. I think a lot of people had Florida State and or Miami in their ACC championship. Clearly, don't have to, explain to everybody the struggles Florida State has had. It's interesting. If there's an offense that's struggling more than Oklahoma and the Power Four, I think it's Florida State. So watching some of that film has been a bit of a head scratcher here getting ready for this game for Mike Norvell. But Miami has been stellar offensively. They're finding ways to win, even getting some help maybe by the ACC Command Center and a couple of these. But they're 7-0, 6 in the country. Cam Ward is I believe, tied for the odds-on leader in the Heisman Trophy race and your Heisman Trophy odds. And so that should be a fun one. And just the rivalry aspect of it. There's going to be a lot of former Hurricanes in the building, and I think several former great Seminoles. So who knows? With the rivalry aspect, I think it's just like Oklahoma's game. I think it's like a 3-touchdown game, but who knows? Maybe with the rivalry aspect, we can get some semblance of some competition and a good matchup there down in South Beach on Saturday night.
You're awesome. Let's get a quick break. More with Dusty Dvoracek next right here on the Home of Sooner Fans.
This is the Ref Sports Radio Network.
The development of Grayson Halton. He's not a young guy, but young in the sense that, hey, this is kind of the first season that he's really gotten into the mix and produced on a consistent basis. And Jaden Jackson, it just popped across the timeline moments ago. Highest graded true freshman defensive tackle according to Pro Football Focus from this past week. Those two guys, Dusty, what impresses you about those two now that we're kind of in the mix of this SEC schedule?
They've been excellent, man. They really have, and they worked a couple of twist games in this past weekend in particular. We've seen a lot of interior twists throughout the course of the season. I think that Coach Bates does a really good job teaching that, and they execute it out there on the field. But for Jaden Jackson, I think he is so sturdy, physical, and always where he needs to be. He plays with great effort also. And with Grayson Holt, man, just the ability to get vertical and create negative plays. I mean, he's got a really good get off, can jump the snap count, and create havoc in opposing offense's backfield, which it's been awesome to watch. Those two guys have, without question, been major bright spots really throughout the entirety of the season. I mean, you go back to that Texas game, and I thought Grayson Holt made a couple of really nice hustle effort plays, creating some negative plays, and even not just against the run. I think Grayson Holt in particular, the ability to pressure from inside the quarterback has been really good. So, going into the year, I think there was a ton of focus on Dominic Williams, who's been solid. Dominic, I think he has been rock solid. We knew with Jaden Jackson being that true freshman to get a chance to start, we anticipated that he would be good, and I think that he's been as advertised and some. I think Grayson Holton playing, I think he's been the real surprise. I don't know how many people thought he would have as much success, both from a production standpoint and then just a disruption standpoint that he's had for this defense so far.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. Is so many people I shouldn't say so many people. Everyone then will be like, well, why aren't we seeing more of David? What's wrong with David Stone? Nothing is wrong with him. He's developing. He's learning. And I think he's got a chance to be really special as he learns from Todd Bates.
Yeah, he will. And he wasn't quite as ready, man. He's a little bit more raw. And you could see that in the spring. You could see it in the fall. And, everybody isn't ready to play as true freshmen. That's okay. And I also think that, whether it's Dejon Terry or, they've got good depth there along in the defensive tackle room, which you felt coming in and you've been able to see throughout the course of the season. There's no reason to panic or get overly upset that David Stone isn't out there just yet. I do think, because I think as like a true just natural pass rusher, he's going to offer more than Jaden Jackson. I mean, Jaden Jackson was just so ready to play. And I think that it probably on some level, it surprised his coaching staff going back to last spring, just exactly where he was whenever he came in. And David Stone wasn't. I mean, he had a lot to work on. I think pad leverage. I think technique, footwork, and he's going to get there.
You talked about Jacob Jordan being, one of the bright spots from Oklahoma's contest versus South Carolina. I'm curious from your playing experience, the walk-on guys. I don't want to say that the fan base turns their nose up to walk-on guys every now and again, but the fan base turns their nose up to walk-on guys every now and again. So what do those guys bring to the table? And obviously we saw the results in this last contest.
Well, nobody's turning their nose up to Jacob Jordan right now. I mean, everyone I talk to wants to see more 88. Let's go. Get him the rock. Walk-ons are so important to any program. And, oftentimes, not always, but there's a lot of times where that it goes unnoticed because they may never get a chance to get on the field. Or if they do, it's very minimal. And so I think that if you've ever been inside a locker room or you've ever, been on a college team, you recognize and understand and have an appreciation and respect for walk-ons and what they put themselves through. And, there's a lot of thankless time that goes into their job. And when they get those opportunities and they make the most of them, it's absolutely awesome. I think a pretty good walk-on that just left here that obviously earned a scholarship in Drake Stoops. I think that he holds a special place, not just because of his last name, but the way that he played in a lot of people's hearts. So, look, and especially anytime a walk-on can earn that scholarship, there's been a lot that have come through. I think of Corey Heineke as one that I played with that, he was a leader along that defensive line my freshman year, and he was a former walk-on. There's been a lot. Baker Mayfield obviously ring a bell for a lot of people, but I think for Jacob Jordan, man, I just see whenever watched him the other day, I just saw someone that really taking advantage of his opportunity and playing extremely hard, playing smart, finding open space. And it's amazing when you find open space and you do things as hard and as fast as you possibly can, good things happen. And I'm hopeful we get a chance to continue to see more of him and more good things happen. We have not seen a ton of production from that wide receiver room, especially since we haven't seen Deion Burks. I know there's been a couple of splash plays here and there from Brendan Thompson, but I think Jacob Jordan, I don't know how you guys feel, I think he earned the right to get more opportunities. And I think there's a lot of Sooner fans that are excited to see 88 back on the field and see what he can do in an encore performance from last Saturday.
Final few moments here with Dusty, so let's turn it over to you guys on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line, 405-651-3439. I like this from Realtor Chris for you, Dusty. He writes, something I hadn't really thought about until today. Go back to 2022 and look how relatively good that offense was, except for the 2 games that DG was out, Dylan Gabriel. The offense went from really good to one of the worst in the country with one player being out. My question or concern is, has having first-round quarterbacks masked offensive issues in the last few seasons? What do you think?
I think that's fair. Now, there's been some good offensive linemen that have come through here, man. Bill Beatonbow, his track record it's bona fide now. We start going down the list of players that he's coached and have come through here, and you don't have to look much further. There's one playing for the Dallas Cowboys every Sunday right now. He's a first-round pick, and Tyler Guyton that just came through from last season. So I don't want to act like there have not been good offensive lines. But look, I thought going back to the previous regime, elite quarterback play masked a lot of deficiencies, not just on offense, but for the football team. And I think that is a position when you can have elite quarterback play, it can cover up a lot. So I think it's a fair assessment. There's no doubt. And boy, there's a pretty good track record of not just good, but elite quarterback play that's been going on for quite some time. And obviously, whenever you don't have that, the flaws, they really, really reveal themselves.
Yeah. And listen, was Dylan Gabriel a first-round quarterback? No, because if he was, he would not be at Oregon right now. He'd be playing in the NFL. But at the very least, it was a guy that knew the offense, that had been a veteran. And it's kind of wild now because a lot of people like to use some revisionist history, and that's fine. Do what you want. Dylan Gabriel wanted to play closer to home, and he's doing a great job. Dusty, he might go down as one of the most accomplished college quarterbacks statistically that we've ever had. Now, it helps when you play about 6 years, but
That's right.
there's no doubt that he's pretty special at that position because of his experience.
He is experienced, and I would just say, and what made him so important in 2022, and even what helped allow him to have so much success, is his understanding of the system. I mean,
right?
It was the system he played at in UCF. And the 1 year he didn't play in this system at UCF was 2021, and he got hurt pretty early on under Gus Malzahn. And it's what allowed him an additional year, right? He was able to get, I believe, a red shirt for that season. So I think that and he's awesome, man.
He's a great kid.
But he had just a great understanding of this scheme, this offense, and in particular, as it relates to his time at Oklahoma with that offensive coordinator. I mean, Jeff Levy's who recruited him and got him to go to UCF. So, they had just an outstanding relationship that went back, and then just he had I think that they were seeing things out of the exact same lens and just had an extreme understanding of exactly what was going to be called and the answers for what's called if you get a certain look, and it clearly worked out very well. And I think he's really, even though it's a new scheme and different staff there in Oregon, he's got great pieces around him, and he's played so much football. And I think that he's playing with so much confidence, it's still allowing him to have a lot of success. So it is wild, though, when you think back to that 2022 year, the Texas game in particular, when he wasn't there, just the stark, and I mean stark contrast in the offense's inability to function from whenever he was in there, and they functioned at a very high level.
Spartan Sooner. T-Row talked about it this morning with most of these offensive linemen coming back next year. Is it better to stick with them as your starters for next season and hope that more time together makes them better rather than going back to the portal and getting multiple new linemen again, or do you go to the portal?
It's a great question. Let's see. There's 5 more games. I mean, I think you want to see continued improvement, right? I mean, right. I don't think that we're just over half a season in. There's 5 and potentially 6 more games left in this year. So I think that, I think the hope would be that a lot of these guys continue to improve, and you see, players get better and better, and gives you optimism that, hey, man, another winter conditioning program, another spring practice, spring camp, and another summer conditioning that, coming back a whole nother year later, they're going to be that much more improved. But I do think that, how this thing goes, these final 5 games will probably have some kind of factor. There's going to be sit-downs. This is just the reality. And this will probably be with staff and players. But there's going to be sit-downs at the end of the year, and, it's going to be players that are brought in, and they're going to be probably advised to, hey, we definitely want to have you back, and there's probably going to be you might want to think about seeing if there's other opportunities. That's just the reality of where college football is right now, and I think some of those conversations are still very much up in the air, and that's what we're going to continue to find out, continue to gather information, what happens here over these next 5 games. So I don't know how T-Row answered that question, but I think it's tough to give a definitive answer because you need to see exactly what the remainder of the season looks like. I will say, like, offensive linemen, they're a hot commodity in the portal.
Yes.
And everyone knows that. Like, everyone's looking to upgrade their offensive line in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a reality in college football right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see if guys are able to improve and if we see, steps in the right direction here the remainder of the season.
All right. Hey, Dusty, before let's get out of here, what a great weekend of college football. we have ahead of us, man. Vanderbilt getting a chance to pull a shocker against Texas, and Vandy's been pretty good. And, oh, man, the freak-out going on right now in Tuscaloosa after Saturday is something to behold, isn't it?
There's a lot of freakouts going on around college football. I mean,
thank you.
There's freakouts going on here.
Yes.
Hey, I think, one thing we haven't really touched on, I mean, what's going on at USC, I don't think that's got Sooners fans' dobbers down too much, right?
No.
I mean, I think they could probably look out west and be pretty fired up about that start for the Trojans, because I'm sure they're freaking out there in L.A., and there's no doubt, I mean, really since halftime of the Georgia game, I mean, has Alabama played any good? I know that they found a way to get the win over South Carolina, but the loss to Vanderbilt, the loss this past week, and a bad second half against Tennessee. I mean, there's some folks definitely on the edge of hitting the panic button if it already hasn't. The sirens have been sounded, but the game I'm doing, Tallahassee. I mean, imagine that fan base. You go from undefeated ACC champions to your 1-6, dead last in the Power 4 in offense. I mean, like it is kind of. I mean, Michigan. How about the folks in Ann Arbor right now? I mean,
not happy.
And they've got a game against Michigan State this week that I think is extremely losable. They're having all kinds of issues on the offensive side for Sharon Moore and year one at the helm there. So it is a great week of college football. That game down in College Station, it fascinates the heck out of me. I think LSU A&M is going to be big-time television there on Saturday night. And I'm just hopeful that I'm hopeful that the offense can show some semblance, some signs of improvement. I will say, as I know we got to get out of here.
No.
Ole Miss's defense it's really good. Like I think Ole Miss's defense is better than their offense. So I know what South Carolina was last week, but if you think that it's about to get easier this week against Ole Miss, I think you should go check the tape. Walter Nolan on the interior, number 2, he is a problem. I mean, this offensive line, Plank, it's going to be put to the test once again. J.J. Pegues, inside, he goes outside, a little defensive end and defensive tackle. I mean, he is an absolute problem. I don't know what the prognosis right now for Princely Oman Mielen is. He's missed the last couple of games, but when he's in there, he's a really good edge rusher. Jared Ivey is more of a power defensive end, but he's very productive. He's played a lot of football. And then the linebacking core, I think the linebacking core is better than what you saw last week for South Carolina. I mean, they fly around. They tackle well. I'm a big fan of Chris Paul Jr., TJ Daugherty. And then they got kind of a hybrid guy and Suntaran Perkins, who is kind of a stand-up outside back. They'll play him in some defensive end. They'll use him as a spy in some spots, kind of as a delayed rusher on the quarterback. So they've got a good scheme. They get after it. And Oklahoma, I mean, I know that they got a lot going on, and the offense has had their struggles. They're going to need to figure some things out this week. It's going to be loud, and that's going to be that's a defensive front in Ole Miss that they got a lot of dudes that are going to play at the next level, and they're going to challenge Oklahoma once again here this week. So I'm hopeful that Joe John Finley, I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's got a great plan, and I'm hopeful they're able to go out and execute, because it's going to be a challenge here on the road there in Oxford.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you, Dusty. Have a safe trip down to the Miami, and we'll talk to you again soon, bud.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Plank.
Dusty Dvoracek. Hey, when we come back, One Oklahoma has us hooked up with Stephen Campbell. Let's talk some golf, some Sooner golf next right here on the Ref.
This is the Ref Sports Radio Network.